The sky was the color of dirty milk, pale and heavy. It pressed low against the ridgeline, sagging like an old canvas tent before a storm. Wind curled through the bare cottonwoods with the sound of breath caught in the throat, rattling the frozen branches like bones. Snow had not yet fallen, but the air bit sharp, smelling of iron and wood smoke. Beneath that colorless sky, a woman walked alone. Her boots cracked through the frost-hardened mud, the hem of her coat stiff with ice. One child clung to her skirts, the other she carried limp and shivering against her chest. The boy had stopped crying 2 miles back. His small hand, still clenched near her collar, was turning the color of dust. She didn't look down. She couldn't afford to. The road was narrow and cold and led only forward. There had been a wagon once, a good mule and a man with broad shoulders. But the mule broke its leg after a panic stumble in the dark, and the man, her husband, had not been strong enough to face a winter like this. He had lain down by the fire one night and didn't get back up. That was 8 days ago. Now she walked. The town ahead, Fetterman, if the sign could be trusted, was just a smudge on the horizon, all gray rooftops and fence posts poking up from the earth like broken ribs. No one came out to meet her. No one ever did. She could have been a ghost for all the attention the town gave. Doors stayed shut. Curtains didn't move. She didn't blame them. The frontier didn't have room for strangers. Still, her legs kept moving, brittle and mechanical. Her daughter stumbled. She stopped to pull the girl close and knelt to wipe her cheeks with her bare hand. Her own skin was cracked open at the knuckles, blood thin and cold. "It's just a little farther," she whispered, though her voice had gone ragged and flat. The lie was easier than silence. When they reached the first building, an old feed store with a shutter hanging loose, she slumped against the side, holding her son tighter. The wood was rough and smelled of mice. She sank down to sit in the dirt, legs splayed, back against the wall. The pain in her spine pulsed like a warning bell. Her stomach had turned inside out the night before, and nothing had passed her lips since. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but she would not cry. Her name was Evelyn. She remembered that now, as if the wind had said it. Evelyn Morrow, born near Leavenworth, married in a parlor with lace curtains, left behind by everything she had known. Her children stood. The boy whimpered, his lips purple, and she rocked him gently, numb to the weight. A sound. The door creaked open behind her. Boots scrunched the frost. "You all right, Mum?" The voice was deep but quiet, cautious. She didn't look up. Her head leaned back against the wall. "No." A pause. "I can fetch the doc." She shook her head once, hard enough to make her teeth rattle. "H.E.S. past help." It washed until then the man stepped closer. He was tall, broad, minus-shouldered, wrapped in a buffalo coat, stained with old snow. Eye hat shadowed his eyes, but his mouth was drawn, his jaw working like he chewed on a thought before speaking it. "Come inside, at least. There's fire. Bread." She almost said no again. It felt wrong to accept kindness from someone who had unturned her rust. But the girl beside her swayed on her feet, eyes half closed. The boy coughed sharp and dry. Evelyn stood, though it took her to try. Her knees wobbled, her head swam. The man reached a hand toward her arm, then stopped short, letting her choose. She nodded. Inside, the heat hit her like a blow. Her body didn't trust it. A stove burned near the back wall, orange light flickering across shelves of dusty grain sacks. A woman bustled in from a side room, her sleeves rolled up, face flushed from the fire. "She'll need blankets," the man said, "and something warm to drink." The woman moved fast, wrapping the children in quilts that smelled of cedar. Evelyn sat on a crate, holding the boy close as steam from a chip mug rose to her face. She didn't drink yet, just breathed it in. The man crouched in front of her, his gloved hands resting on his knees. "You're from Kansas?" She looked up, stalled. "How do you know?" "You've got it in your voice." She nodded once. Then, as if the words came loose from her chest, "He died in Nebraska. Tried to cut south before the worst of the snow. I told him we should wait it out. He wouldn't listen." Silence filled the room again, broken only by the ticking stove and the girl's soft breathing. "You did right," the man said finally. "Getting them here. You kept them alive." She looked down at her children. For a moment, she saw them the way strangers would to filthy, Hungry little things, half minus asleep from cold. But then her hand moved to the boy's chest, where his breath still fluttered beneath her palm. Alive. Thank you, she whispered, voice cracked but true. The man stood. Name's Silas. I own the feed store. Evelyn looked at him, then away. She didn't need anything else just yet, but she knew now. She had made it through the cold. By morning the snow had come. It blanketed the rooftops in soft, heavy silence and clung to the fences like old cotton. The world outside the feed store turned white and still, as if holding its breath. Inside, the warmth of the stove pulsed slow and steady, like a living heart. Evelyn woke on a narrow cot near the back wall, tucked beside sacks of oats and flour. Her daughter slept beside her, curled tight like a kitten, a faded quilt drawn to her chin. The boy was in a cradle someone had found in the attic, lined with flannel and straw. He made soft noises in his sleep, lips twitching as if suckling at dreams. For a long moment, Evelyn just stared at them. Her back ached, her limbs were stiff, and her stomach still hollowed with hunger. But her babies were breathing. That was all that mattered. She stood slowly, her bare feet cold against the floorboards. The coat she had worn for weeks hung by the door, stiff and stained. Her hands brushed over it as she passed. In the front of the store, someone moved a low rustle, a scrape of wood. She found Silas there bent over the stove, coaxing life back into the embers with slow, practiced patience. He didn't look up when she came in, just nudged the fire with a poker and added another log. You sleep? A little. He nodded, still not facing her. The room smelled of ash and coffee and something faintly sweet, molasses maybe. There's bread on the counter. Applesauce too. She hesitated, then moved toward the counter. The bread was thick and dark, cut from a round loaf. Her fingers trembled slightly as she broke off a piece. You got family? She asked. Silas glanced at her. Used to. Not anymore. She said nothing, just chewed. The bread turned to paste in her mouth, but it was warm. You? My sister's in Topeka, or she was. Haven't had a letter since July. Any chance you'll go back? She shook her head. It's not mine anymore, and I can't ask her to feed 3 extra mouths. Silas leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. He looked older in the daylight, creases around the eyes, stubble rough along his chin, but his eyes were sharp, watching her, but not judging. I could use help here, he said after a while. Evelyn stilled. Doing what? Keeping the books, managing supplies, cooking, if you don't mind simple fare. I don't do more than boil most days. A long pause. Snow brushed against the window in soft gusts. I don't want charity, she said finally. Not offering it, he replied. Business has picked up this winter. Ranchers need feed and travelers need rest. I can't keep up alone. And you look like a woman who knows how to work. She looked down at her hands. The skin around her fingernails had cracked and bled. Her palms were tough as leather. I do. Then stay. A week. 2. See if it suits you. Her throat tightened and she didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded. That first week passed slowly. The storm worsened, making travel near impossible. No one came in or out, and the store became its own little world. Evelyn worked each day in quiet rhythm, sweeping the floor, taking inventory, boiling oats for breakfast, folding laundry near the stove. The baby grew stronger, her daughter's cheeks pinked again. At night, after the children slept, Silas would sit by the fire and carve small wooden animals, foxes, birds, once even a bear. His hands were rough but careful. H.E.D. set them on the shelf for the children, never saying a word. One night, Evelyn sat across from him, mending a tear in a pair of trousers. You don't talk much, she said. I talk when there's something worth saying. She smiled faintly, eyes on her needle. You carve well. My father taught me. Said a man should know how to make something with his hands that don't feed his stomach. Is that why you stayed here? This town? Silas looked at the fire. No, I stayed because I ran out of places to go. They sat in silence for a while after that, the fire snapping between them. By the second week, Evelyn knew the store like the inside of her own coat. She swept snow from the fronts each morning, kept the ledger tidy, and learned which men bought on credit and which ones paid in flour or jerky. The work steadied her, rooted her. Her hands had purpose again. The townspeople started noticing. The doctor's wife brought soup one afternoon. A boy delivered a sack of apples without a word. An old woman with a twisted back asked if Evelyn would take in some mending work for coin. He'd lost affection. Not yet, but it was a kind of trust. And in a place like this that meant everything. Silas didn't say much, but he watched. And every night she found a new carving waiting on the shelf. A horse, a rabbit, a tiny cradle. Evelyn didn't ask, but she wrapped them in cloth and placed them near her children's bed. On the 20-4th morning, the sun rose clear and gold over the snow, casting long, soft shadows across the drift. The light felt gentler somehow, less like punishment. Evelyn stood at the window with her hands wrapped around a tin mug, watching smoke rise from neighboring chimneys. Her son giggled behind hers, swaddled in quilts, poking at the latest carving, an owl with eyes too big for its head. Her daughter sat near the stove, humming as she arranged a row of stones into careful shapes on the floor. It felt ordinary, and for Evelyn that was the strangest thing of all. She had learned not to trust quiet days. They never lasted. The bell above the store door jangled. She turned. A man stood in the doorway, stomping snow from his boots. He was tall and lean, with a red scarf wound tight at his throat. His eyes were sharp, his jaw tight with judgment. He looked at Evelyn, then past her. "Silas here." She nodded and stepped back. The man didn't thank her. Silas appeared from the storeroom, wiping his hands on a rag. The moment his eyes landed on the man, something changed in his face. Not fear exactly, not anger either. Just a dull bracing, like he'd been waiting for something unpleasant to arrive. "Henry," Silas said. The man tipped his chin. "You got my letter?" "Yeah." "And?" Silas crossed his arms. "Not selling." Henry's eyes flicked toward Evelyn again, then back. "Even with the new help?" Silas didn't answer. Henry laughed, short and humorless. "She working here now? That what this is?" Silas stepped forward. "She's not your concern. She's everybody's concern if she's drawing water from a town well and sleeping under a roof you're too soft to hold alone." Evelyn's cheeks flushed. Her hand tightened on the mug's handle, the metal biting cold into her skin. "She's here because she earned it," Silas said, voice low and steady. Henry smirked. "That's what you're calling it now." Silas moved closer. "I won't tell you again." Henry held up his hands. "All right, but don't act surprised when the council asks questions. You let one stray in, more will follow." He turned and left, the bell jangling once more. Evelyn stood frozen. "He was right," she said after a moment. "I am a burden." "No," Silas said without turning. She stepped closer. "It's not wrong to question me." Silas looked at her then. "Evelyn, there's not a man in this town who's shoveled more graves than Henry Morrow. He sees the world through that dirt. Don't let it in your lungs." She swallowed hard, drew dry. "I don't want to cost you anything." "You haven't." He didn't say more. He just walked back to the stove and stirred the pot, as if nothing had happened. But his shoulders were stiff, and the silence between them felt different now. Not colder, just heavier. That night, she found him outside splitting wood behind the store. The snow had melted in patches, revealing the hard, dark earth beneath. The axe swung in clean arcs, the crack of each strike echoing through the still air. She waited until he stopped to wipe his brow. "You could have let me go," she said. "I could have." "You didn't." He rested the axe against the stump. "You think I brought you in out of pity?" "I don't know." "I didn't." She stepped closer, boots sinking into the wet snow. "Then why?" Silas took a breath and looked out toward the fields. "Because I've watched this town turn its back on too many people. It turns slow and quiet and never looks again. I'm not built for that kind of forgetting." The wind tugged at her shawl. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. "You ever been in love, Silas?" He didn't answer right away. "Then once. A long time back. Didn't last. Mine did. Even when it shouldn't have. Even when he left me with more cold than comfort." Silas looked at her. "I'm not him." "I know." He stepped closer. Close enough that the warmth from his coat met her child hands. "I don't need anything from you, Evelyn. But I won't pretend I don't want something." She met his eyes. "Like what?" He smiled, faint and crook. Like a morning where I hear your children laugh before I open the shop. Like someone sitting across from me at supper who isn't made of smoke and silence. Like a reason to stay that isn't habit. Her heart ached not in grief this time, but in recognition of what could be, not what had been. She reached out, just slightly, her fingers brushing his coat. "We're not done hurting yet," she whispered. "I know, but maybe we don't have to do it alone." Silas nodded. And for the first time in many, many months, Evelyn felt something break open inside her, not pain, not even relief. Just a small, bright space where hope might fit if she let it. Spring came slow and stingy that year, the thaw creeping down from the hills like it had somewhere else to be. The snow turned to mud, then hardened into dust, and the sky hung white and pale, still uncertain of warmth. But the days lengthened, and the air smelled less like iron and more like dirt and pine. Calves were born, roofs were mended. The world leaned forward just a little. Evelyn found rhythm in the days. She woke before the sun, braided her daughter's hair, boiled coffee thick as tar. She swept floors, counted sacks, stitched buttons, and hung laundry in the thin wind. Her son took his first steps across the back porch in his stocking feet, tumbling with laughter into the arms of a school teacher who happened by. Her daughter helped measure oats with solemn focus, every scoop precise. There was no miracle, just life inching forward. Silas gave her space, but not distance. They worked side by side most days, speaking only when needed, sometimes less. But their quiet held a kind of language now. He'd brush snow from her sleeve without a word. She'd place a clean cloth over his lunch without him asking. They moved around each other like two trees bent by the same wind, leaning inward without knowing. Some nights, they sat outside on the back step, watching the stars come out. The children asleep, the shop locked, the stove dying down to a dull glow. "You ever think of leaving?" she asked once, her voice slow. "All the time. And I never get past the thinking." Evelyn nodded. "Me neither." She didn't say what else she thought about how sometimes, when the light struck his face just right, she could almost believe she hadn't been ruined by grief. How some mornings her first thought was survival, but how he'd take his coffee. How her hands ached less when he was near. But those words felt too big, too final, so she kept them tucked behind her teeth. Trouble came in April, riding in on a black gelding with foam at its flanks and a rider wrapped in oilcloth. The rider's face was young but drawn thin, and he carried a folded letter pressed tight to his chest. "Looking for an Evelyn Morrow," he said, dust choking his voice. She stepped forward, hands wiping on her apron. "That's me." He handed her the letter, then drank from the ladle Silas offered without speaking. When he rode off, neither of them followed with their eyes. Evelyn held the letter for a long moment before opening it. The handwriting was careful, her sister's. She read in silence. When she finished, she handed the paper to Silas. "She's sick," she said. "Not dying, not yet, but close enough." And she asked if he'd come. Silas read the letter, then folded it once, slow and neat. "What do you want to do?" "I want to stay." "Then stay, but I owe her." Silas looked at the ground and back at her. "You don't owe anyone what Elo cost you everything." Evelyn didn't answer. She didn't sleep that night. Neither did Silas. By morning, her decision was made. The town helped them pack the wagon. The doctor's wife brought blankets. The school teacher brought books. Even Henry came with a jar of honey and a stiff nod. Silas fitted the wagon with fresh wheels, checked the axles, packed flour and dried apples, and nailed a small wooden box to the side filled with carved animals. He didn't say much as he worked. Evelyn didn't either. When it came time to leave, she stood by the reins, her children already tucked in, blankets piled around them. "I don't want to go," she said. "I don't want you to, but I need to." Silas stepped forward and took her hand just for a second, but it was enough. His hand was warm, calloused, familiar. "You'll be here when you come back. You don't know that. I know what I choose, and am choosing you." Her eyes burned. She blinked hard. "Don't wait forever." "I won't have to." She climbed into the wagon, gathered the reins, and gave the mule a click of her tongue. The wheels creaked. The road opened ahead, wide and rutted and real. She didn't look back until the rise, where the town fell behind her like a painting growing small. But she saw him, Silas, still standing in the road, one hand in his coat pocket, the other raised in a quiet farewell. She pressed her hand to her heart where the folded letter rested inside her bodice. Not goodbye, just not yet. The road east was longer than she remembered. It bucked and curved through ravines that swallowed the light by midday and opened into plains so flat the sky felt like it might collapse under its own weight. Evelyn drove in silence, the children sleeping more than not, their heads leaned together like saplings caught in the same wind. The days blurred, sunup to sundown, broken only by the creak of the wagon and the soft calls of meadowlarks overhead. She did not cry. Not when they passed the place where her husband had died, just a heap of blackened stones now, barely visible in the new grass. Not when her daughter asked if they were going home, and Evelyn cowed answer. And not when her son called out for Silas in his sleep, voice high and hopeful. Instead, she kept her hands steady and her eyes on the road. When they reached Topeka, the city felt too loud to fast. Smoke rose from brick chimneys in thick, greasy coils. Wheels clattered over cobblestone. People passed without looking, but the house was just as she remembered the stories, with blue shutters and a small white fence. The garden was gone, overtaken by weeds, but the windows were clean. Her sister stood in the doorway, thin and pale, her hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. The sickness showed around the eyes, sunken, bruised, but the voice was strong. "Thought you weren't coming. I almost didn't." They didn't hug, just stood there, weighing each other like women who had both carried too much and knew it. Inside, the house was quiet. The air smelled of lemon and medicine. Evelyn took over the kitchen without asking, boiled water, scrubbed the floors, laid out the linens. At night, she slept in a narrow bed beside her children, listening to her sister's cough echo down the hall like a second clock. Weeks passed. Her sister grew weaker, then steadier, then weaker again. Evelyn did what she had always done, held fast, worked hard, stayed quiet. But each day her thoughts drifted west. She imagined Silas in the feed store, writing in the ledger, carving another bird-aid sheet he'd never give away. She wondered if the stove smoked in the morning, if the school teacher still stopped by for coffee, if anyone swept the porch. Her heart tugged like something tied to a distant post. One afternoon, while her sister slept, Evelyn walked to the post office. There was a letter waiting, just one line. The snow's melted. The porch is waiting. No signature. None needed. She pressed the paper to her chest and closed her eyes. By the time she left Topeka, her sister had color in her cheeks again. Thin, still but stronger. They stood on the porch together, two women with matching lines around their eyes. "You sure?" her sister asked. Evelyn nodded. "I'm not needed here anymore." Her sister looked at the children, then back. "Don't forget you have people here." "I won't." But she knew what she needed now. And it was this street, or this house, or the weight of shared childhoods that no longer fit. It was somewhere quieter, somewhere rougher, somewhere with room to grow. When she returned to Fetterman, it was dusk. The town looked the same, dusty, half-minus asleep, with the wind pushing dry grass across the road like tumble-minus down prayers. She stopped the wagon in front of the feed store. Silas stood on the porch. No words passed between them at first. He walked down the steps, slow, deliberate. His eyes searched her face, and hers did the same. "You came back," he said finally. "I said I would." He looked at the children. They were older now, taller. Her daughter waved. Her son grinned wide enough to split his face. Silas looked at Evelyn again. "You staying?" "I am, if you'll have us." He didn't answer with words. He just reached up, offered his hand, and helped her down. They built something together, not loud, not fast, but strong. She worked beside him in the shop. The townsfolk grew used to her presence, then fond of it. Her daughter went to school. Her son learned to count by measuring nails. Evelyn planted herbs behind the store, and Silas carved her a garden box in the shape of a cradle. In the fall they married. No dress, no preacher, just words exchanged under a cottonwood with golden leaves, to witnesses, and a piece of twine wrapped around their joined hands. Later the town held a supper. They danced until the sky went black and stars spilled down like salt. Years passed. A new child was born, dark, minus-haired and loud. The feed store expanded. Silas grew gray at the temples, and Evelyn's hands grew softer. The porch became a place of stories, of quiet meals, of watching clouds drift like slow herds across the sky. She never forgot the cold or the hunger or the weight of leaving, but she carried it now like a stone smoothed by water. It did not break her. It gave her shape. And on quiet nights with Silas beside her, and her children breathing slow under the same roof, Evelyn Morrow would sit with her sewing in her lap and her feet on the railing and feel, for once, not like a woman who had survived, but like a woman who had chosen. The West still has lessons. Subscribe to learn them.